when you actually spend time with some softwares, then you understand what they truly are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what happens when my clients start using AI to replace me?
You've spent too much time with the models.
Exactly, maybe I do. Well, I couldn't sleep. Should you pay the same multiple for that company than another company that has never even started to use AI? But very, very few actually spend the majority of the time actually on the value, on the insights, right? But if you ask me truly what I think would be, the next generation companies, the way how they will be formed, I think...
First time we met, I think, was in 2019.
Yeah, could be.
We met at my very first office, and I showed you a very early prototype of the Validator software.
Yeah, I remember the demo.
Yeah, and over the years, we've met many more times. We've, for example, done some, we've looked into some deals together, done some advisory, but more than anything else, we've studied and kind of looked into AI and data together.
That's right.
And a few weeks after, or was it a few days after ChatGPT was released, you gave me a call.
Yeah.
What happened when you first tested out ChatGPT?
Well, I couldn't sleep because, I've been working with AI for many years, and I studied AI 20 years ago. And it almost felt like this, this special moment where, things would change. I first time I interacted with ChatGPT, I felt like, I think like everybody else, this feeling of almost an uncanny feeling.
Yeah.
I started testing the boundaries of the system. I started asking questions like logical questions, physical questions, trying to figure out where it finished. And I couldn't find the end of it. So
you tried to break it and it just worked.
Yeah, I tried to see exactly what's the extent of the functionality that it would bring, right?
Yeah.
So I started testing things we were doing at work. I started, making it code. I started making it convert, generate, structured data. And then I realized this was so big that I had to speak with someone that that could understand the extent of it. And so I reached out to you, and we had this famous brainstorm. That was awesome. Yeah.
It was not one brainstorm. We spent so many nights. It was one of the most intense periods so far of my life, because work during the day and evening, and then we stayed up nights to just test things, discuss things, and read up on things.
Exactly. Yeah, it was the reading club.
Yeah, it was crazy, but a very exciting period.
It was fantastic,
and it has been ever since, right?
Yeah. It didn't stop, for sure.
And one of the unique things about you, we have quite a lot of joint friends, right?
Yep.
And when I discuss, when I mention you, one of the things that always comes up is your kind of, it's a bit scary, your ability to consume and understand software. You look at up to 10 or sometimes more than 10 software demos a week.
Yeah.
And some people recognize faces. Some people remember names. Mm-hmm. You remember and understand software like no one else.
Yeah, I can tell you why I do that. So the first half of my career, I was doing software, but my passion was music. So I was consuming music. I was studying music, and at some point I realized I had to do something about my day job because if you're not passionate about what you do, it doesn't work, right? So I realized that I actually like software. I'm actually passionate about it in almost the same way a musician is passionate about music, right? So when you listen to your favorite song, you remember it forever because there's something about it that is important. But I also had a lot of friends that were architects, for example, like building architects.
Yeah.
And when they walk into a place, they start touching everything and analyzing how it is built, how it is put together.
Yeah.
And I realized that a lot of the software engineers I work with didn't do that. They, maybe you study one technology that you're an expert in, but then you end up solving problems in a way that is the only way that you've seen it solved, right? So I understood that by studying software, not only it was fun, but it would give me like a bigger spectrum of solutions and a better understanding of what it takes to build good software, basically. And so, and then, I started doing this, like just logging into a lot of software, learning how it works, seeing, reaching out to the founders and asking them what they were thinking about when they came up with these ideas. And it became a habit. And then I started, the same way with music. You start, maybe you want to listen to one genre a bit more for some time, or to an artist. I started doing the same with software. So I would go into like data stack and just like try them, all the dashboarding tools that exist, just really reach out and have demos. Then, like DBT, I started interacting with that community a lot, seeing how people were using that. And it's a very rich experience. I really recommend it. It's good fun.
You're one of the early adopters of a lot of good technology in our parts of the world, like DBT, Snowflake, and other stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think this kind of deep understanding of software that you have, do you think that's something everyone can acquire?
Yeah, I think it's two. So one thing is looking at software and getting a sense of whether it's good or not. Really understanding the spirit of it, like what is it good for? That's one thing, and it's more superficial. It's sometimes people do it on paper. They do a matrix with requirements and then they compare software. But what I've seen is that when you try it, when you start using it, that's when you truly kind of reveal its character and what it's good for. And sometimes you only see like the good attributes of a software only manifest themselves in like after 6 months, right?
Yep.
And I had the privilege of working in both EQT and Spotify, two environments where it was allowed to try. You could go and sign a contract, like a 3-month contract on a software. And then it was okay to go back and say, well, this is not for us. So that exposure was also very helpful. But also then taking those decisions and letting the years go by and see how they evolved.
Yep.
And comparing how different technologies have evolved. And reflecting about it and understanding, okay, why didn't this work? Why this software was so beautiful and now it's so ugly? Yep. That kind of reflection on aging, I think is very, very interesting. And then you start building up your own kind of language to describe these things.
Because many times when I talk to you about software, you compare, software within the data stack to softwares within CRM, and you make these analogies, or you say, but this is basically just a Wikipedia, and then you make cross-references across software in different industries.
Yes.
But that's because you go a bit beyond the surface, right?
Or
far beyond.
Exactly. Then you start seeing some archetypes, right? So when you, but it comes when you actually spend time with some softwares, then you understand what they truly are, right?
Yeah.
So for me, Salesforce is basically, I call it a database. It's like a database that comes with 3 objects, which is like the account, the contact, and the opportunity. So if you have these 3 tables, you have a CRM, right?
Yes.
And then you look at all the other CRMs and you see they're all more or less the same. And then they add a lot of things on top. But the way how the users perceive it is all they want to do is to manipulate these 3 kind of information objects. So then you start kind of organizing the world in these kind of archetypes. And I think in business software, it's very you see a lot of commonalities. So it's sometimes hard to differentiate. And yeah, I guess that's what happens after a while, after trying a few. So then it comes down more to the the feeling of using it, like the user experience, how the users like it or not.
Yep.
That's what comes next. And then also, I mean, trying things in different areas of the world. And my job, I can spend time with ventures, with emerging companies and see like new ideas that no one has had before, and really understanding. I always ask this question to founders: what is their view of the future in their space, right? So if you're building a new CRM, I want to understand what you think the CRM world will look like in 10 years, right? And from that, then you kind of combine it all. So yeah, it's quite entertaining.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And at EQT, in your current role, how does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, so I guess I should describe the role itself. So what we're trying to do is, really make sure that the portfolio companies that we have are embracing AI to the fullest. Okay, that's kind of the first big objective. But also, even before we invest, we really want to make sure that we're making investment decisions that are where the data opportunity is there and the risks are reasonable, and also think about which companies in general we should invest. But I focus mostly on the due diligence and then on the ownership. And when you have a problem statement, which is how do we make 200 companies embrace AI and really win? You realize that it's very hard to generalize the problems there, right? So one company might be very easy to see to spot the AI opportunities, and other companies much harder. So it's much more nuanced. So it really depends on maturity.
Yes.
Another thing is the size of the opportunity. So some companies have more AI potential than others, right? So we need to also tailor our approach to those cases, and then once, even if you have potential and you have like high maturity, it's still not guaranteed that they will be able to execute, right? So a lot of companies, get stuck very early on with this new technology. So what I do is I really try to first of all devise a strategy for how to approach this universe of companies. But then in practice, what that means is working both in terms of programmatic initiatives, so trying to, for example, raise awareness across the portfolio to let's say AI topics that are relevant. Sometimes it's actually high touch, so we actually interact with some of the companies and support them both in forming their strategy. Getting started with pilots, and we have a couple of programs for acceleration, for proof of value, even before they start allocating resources to do this. And then once they understand it, it's more like a directional thing and making sure they have the right partners, the right technologies. So really how they take this initial stage towards the future. And then eventually also at exit, figuring out how can we, shape the future of this company for the next owner. So really kind of tell the story of how we see the opportunities, so that hopefully the next owner will continue the journey that we started, basically. So a typical day, I don't have typical days, but it's kind of thinking about all these things and talking with a lot of people, organizing a lot of programs and whatnot. Yeah.
Very cool. So when a company comes to you within their portfolio, what are some of the first things you do to figure out how to help them? Because as you say, it very much varies across, maturity, but also opportunity, readiness, their own capabilities, etc. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it has, like, this is evolving, so it changes over time. But last year, as companies were starting to become aware of AI, actually before that we had a lot of companies that were not aware, right? So we started there. We started making sure that we explained the size of the opportunity in a very good way. We worked a lot through the boards, so through the top of the house, and really making sure that those conversations were in place.
How do you do that? How do you make people understand the opportunities?
You need to explain the technology a little bit, and give them some form of let's say framework to like language to talk about it, right? And I can come back to that point, but basically we did some work in terms of having a framework for how to organize your AI strategy, basically. But in my case, I think the early conversations were a lot about explaining that the true nature of this change, because we were coming from a world where AI was a very complicated matter. And then we had to explain that the true change here was not just the innovation, but the fact that there's a democratization of this AI, right? So the accessibility is quite high. So the first conversations I had, just to give you an example, people would say, "Oh, okay, so where do I go find data scientists to help me with my AI?" And so we had to explain that, with AI as a service, you basically don't need a data scientist of the same caliber as you needed a year ago. You can probably do a lot just with a regular software engineer. So we kind of explained those things. We also explained the compound effect of AI. So the fact that this is not the end, this is just the beginning of a pretty massive shift. And then we would actually go into examples and say, okay, let me show you how I can use this to achieve things, and to give you some sort of inspiration on where to look. So that was the beginning. But then, people started prioritizing this and paying attention. So we started then doing a lot of workshops for prioritization. Because when people start interacting with AI, then they understand, oh, I have 300 use cases. And a lot of
they have nothing in mind, and as soon as they understand, they have everything in mind.
Exactly. So and also the advisories and all the media is really pushing for the use case, the lists of use cases. So early decks that I saw, they would show something like 50 use cases. And then what I started doing is I started asking, okay, can I meet the CEO of the company that implemented this use case? And I realized that a lot of it was just ideas, was not so much, proven use cases.
These are a lot of consultancy firms.
Yeah, some. Yeah.
Consultancy firms pushing.
Exactly. Or even when you say, okay, I want like a deep dive on a sector.
Yeah.
Typically, what people would do is basically brainstorm around use cases, which is good value for inspiration, but it kind of misses the point, which is what we started doing, which is to really focus on the company itself and its strategy, right?
Yeah.
So there was this moment where I realized that I was asking the wrong question, which is, what is your AI strategy? And we started resetting the conversation to, what is your strategy? How does your company work? Why do clients buy from you? And then the follow-up question was, okay, let us find places where AI can amplify your differentiation or can do more for you. Okay.
So you moved the conversation from being about we need to use AI and focusing more on how can we improve your strategy with
that's
AI.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. So we started asking about the business metrics. So what are you trying to achieve this year? What's your goal? So if someone says, well, my goal is to reduce my cost base by 20%, then more or less that there might be ways to do that with AI, right?
Yes.
But sometimes that was not the case. The goal was growth, for example, was increasing the download rate on my website. And then you would figure out, okay, why do people like your website? What is the main feature that makes people use your product? And then we would then brainstorm around, okay, is there anything that we can do with AI here? Okay. So that was a big shift, because then it kind of, what you do is very easy. You say, okay, you want to reduce costs, show me your cost items. Let's see where are the pockets of value. And then you match that to use case. You see, oh, actually you have pretty massive customer support case here. Yes. So maybe we could think about doing something. What I think is then interesting is when you start, typically you go for the more immediate cases, like in the customer support. Maybe you want to automate the FAQ, like the self-healing tickets.
The simple errands.
The simple, like a wiki, just instead of finding on wiki, you just serve that. And typically it takes a lot of, it removes a lot of volume, just that simple recipe. But the important thing that is part of our job is to make sure that they don't stop there. That once they see, oh, actually this thing works, that you have the conversation about what's next. And that's when you then start thinking, okay, so now you have a chatbot that is able to fulfill 70% of your basic tickets. The next step would be for you to enter conversation and serve also things like questions around billing. And then why not also start doing cross-selling and saying, hey, your iPhone is pretty old. Why don't you take a 20% discount on a new device? Or things of this nature. And really kind of shape a bit of a roadmap. So really stop thinking about the project and start thinking about this capability to evolve your channel in interesting ways with AI at your service, right? So that is typically kind of the place where we want to be, is being on those conversations. But
so you basically take them through kind of educating them, making them aware of AI in the first place. Mm-hmm. And then you help them to get started. Yep. And then you help them paint the vision. Yep. And support them along the way.
Exactly. And it's different. I mean, to be fair, some of the companies, they already have a pretty decent idea of what to do, and they're kind of embracing already organically.
Yes.
What we try to do in those cases is more to organize the different areas where they can push, so that the effort is being put in the right place as soon as possible. But it's no different from, let's say, digital strategy, really. But we do it with a very thematic angle on AI.
And the recent 1-2 years, mm-hmm. there has been a lot of buzz and hype around AI. Mm-hmm. How has that impacted your work? It creates a lot of we call them flare-ups. It's when there's like this explosion of, oh no, there's this, Klarna, they're cutting 700 people with AI. Why don't we do the same, right? Yeah. So that creates a little bit of disruption. I think there are a couple of risks, and this is a bit of a personal opinion here, but because there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of companies that are trying to get into the AI building services. The risk is that some companies will fail their first project and burn all the money they had on the first project, and then feel like actually this is not for us. So kind of be disappointed too soon with the pilot. And never get to the moment where they actually have a capability that was built, right? So there's, I think there's this famous phrase, which is we have more pilots than Lufthansa, right? Yes.
That I remember we spoke about that. It's really true. So there's a big risk that the buzz makes people make things that are not necessarily the right ones, or without the resources and the enablers in place. Or even worse, they do something that is awesome, but then they don't have a plan for what to do next. So how to put it in production, so that is a bit of a risk.
You still see these numbers, despite there being a lot of interest and hype around the value and the opportunities with AI and data. Almost 90% of all AI and data projects still fail, right? They fail to reach production or are quickly taken out of production. And the adoption remains quite low on average.
It depends on your goal, right? I think. So 90% is a very, very dark number.
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with that, because when you do a project, sometimes the goal of that project is for you to learn something as a company, right? That's why I like the word capability more.
Yeah.
Right. So if I do a pilot and I throw it away, and my team learns how to do AI, that is very good value. So the objective, there was a success, even though there's no code in production, right? So I think sometimes it's a bit of a perspective on strategy.
It depends on what you're after in that project, then.
Exactly.
Can you explain a bit what Motherbrain Labs does?
Yeah, sure. So Motherbrain Labs is a team that we created when we realized that leveraging data for venture capital, which is something we've been doing for a long time, so using data to find companies, when applied to the context of private equity, it was not the same problem that we had to solve, right? So we created a team instead with the idea that they would specialize in answering certain questions with data, right? So one example that I can give you is, let's say we're investing in a company and we think we want to do some M&A, so we want to acquire companies that are relevant for that business. Instead of building a software to do that, we would have this team that would just do almost like a tailor-made software, single purpose for the sole purpose of answering that question. So we did that a lot. So we basically created a team. They would know very well how to use this data, and they would basically, the engagement model is that we come in and we say, hey, what question do you want me to answer? And then we build a data product to answer that question. So it could
be... For
the
portfolio companies?
For portfolio and for the deal teams as well. So also in the context of sourcing, due diligence, and whatnot. But, for example, if you want to buy, a school in France, that's such a bespoke thing that you need to build software to go and find the list of schools in France. Maybe they have a specific, website, localized website for reviews. Maybe what it means to be a good school there is different than another country. Maybe it's like, I don't know, horseback riding is big deal in one country, in another country is golf or whatever. So we tailor-made the software to kind of go find the thing we want. And that is the nature of this team. Yeah, but to your question before about success, right? This is an example of a team whose definition of success. So when we have one project, the definition of success is whether we answered the question in a very good way. So this code never goes to production. There's no concept of production in this case. But what we see is that the team just keeps getting better and better and better, right? So the effectiveness of their answers is increasing over time. And that is a property I really appreciate, and very few, let's say, technologists focus so much on the learning as kind of an objective. But I think it's quite important. So when I tell a company, hey, you should do a pilot, let's get it done like really quick, let's do a hackathon, I'm not hoping for code in production. I'm hoping for their ability to estimate what do they need to do to actually get it to production to increase, right? So I want them to learn what it is they need to build, and I want them to get an intuition of what they need to do to actually get it done.
So you're basically investing in the AI capabilities of the organization.
That's right. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
So when you work with a specific company in the portfolio, let's say, how do you measure the success of that engagement?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So on a tactical level, we certainly want to link all the initiatives to some business metric, as I mentioned. So if it's productivity, we would love if your AI strategy has some connection to that. So the project that you're implementing is connected to the productivity or to the cost metric. But what I think helps a lot driving that discussion is when we organize the strategy in these 3 buckets that we like to think. Actually, there's now I think more of 4 buckets, and I'll tell you what they are. So the first bucket is very hard to measure, which is what we call workplace productivity, but it's really kind of AI that is used on the workplace. So ChatGPT is a good example where we think you should roll it out. I don't know that I can go and measure on average how much faster you are at writing emails with this, right? So in that case, you typically want to go for a metric around adoption. I know some companies are doing that. So what they say is, I have a KPI on my managers where they test the number of employees that are actually using AI on a regular basis, right? This is particularly relevant if you have software engineers, for example. It's quite nice that you have a metric that forces your software engineers to embrace co-pilots, for example, because it takes a while, So, but beyond the workplace, I think the other 3 main buckets that we think about. One is productivity. Or efficiency. The second one is product differentiation. And the third one is value chain or competitive shifts, right? So on the efficiency or productivity is quite direct. So typically you want to see things like related to your operation, right? So it could be, how many employees are you using to perform a certain function and what's the output? But it could also be things like yield on your factory. So how many units are you producing? It could also be quality related. So we do have companies that are actually doing very interesting things in the industrial side. It could also be the productivity or the efficiency of your sales team. So how fast can they answer an RFP, for example, on average? So those are typically fairly straightforward. I also I would love to have some quality metrics tied into this. So, for example, it could be the number of times you need to fix an invoice that was wrongly posted, right? So we can actually think about some of those. But then on the differentiation, so which is more the product facing, there's one aspect that are your core metrics. So if you're a company that is selling pictures, the download rate on your website could be the right metric to use. Or if you're, we have like epidemic sound, for example, a metric could be how long on average does it take for my users to find the right song? And then you find ways for the AI to increase the relevance of the results or things like that. But what is also interesting here is when you start thinking about new markets. So when you say, now there's new demand for AI-generated images. So are we being able to capture that? That is a little bit more kind of new ground. So it's going to be a business that perhaps does not generate revenue for the beginning. So now what you have is a company that is, a mature company, but all of a sudden needs to have this new business line that is almost like startup-y, pre-revenue, pre-product market fit, and then it's a whole different confusion, as you know, which is kind of you need to figure out what's working and what's not working. So there is a bit harder to measure, and it's also a bit of a more cultural, sometimes a bit of a cultural gap for more developed companies. And so the last bucket is then the value chain moves, and this is the one that I see the least explored one. What it is basically when you start thinking of your AI strategy outside the boundaries of your company. Okay, so what does this mean? It means asking questions such as, I'm outsourcing this function to this other company, let's say accounting services. Is there a chance for me to leverage AI to actually insource that with a fraction of the cost? This is a very basic example. But more interesting is when you start thinking about your clients. So if you're now an accounting company yourself, okay, what happens when my clients start using AI to replace me? How can I keep them connected to or keep buying from me? How can I use AI to make sure that they become more efficient, that they have extra value add from my services, and so on. Another aspect could be, okay, we're this company. We've been generating all this data for years and years. And now I see that there's huge demand from the model makers to tap into data of this type. Is there a new business for us? Should we pivot a little bit and start capturing some of that value as well? It could be kind of unlocking these assets. So saying, okay, now I have this asset that is actually something that I can monetize. So there's a new revenue stream here that is interesting.
You have examples of that from, for example, Reddit that has become very famous.
That's right. Yeah.
I think they signed one of their first deals was around 60 million USD for 1 year license to one of the big tech giants to just license their data for training purposes.
Exactly. So
now they are in hundreds of millions.
Exactly. The interesting discussion there is, imagine the board of Reddit, now looking at their company and thinking, okay, now our revenues or our financials will look very different. So how does that affect our our incentive structures, our sales teams? Should they also get a cut from that money, or should we keep them just like selling ads or whatever they do? So it raises questions on that really go to the fabric. They really shake the organizations.
It's the same for companies that sell stock images, right?
Yeah, that's
or sound clips.
Yeah. I mean, it affects all of them. So these are really interesting discussions that I think the boards need to have about how this affects the org. Should the AI team be, under the CTO? Should the AI team be under the COO? All of these questions start to emerge. And so usually when we're on this last bucket and your question was like, how do you measure success? I think when you get to these, the really strategic side of things, it gets a bit more blurry. And so ultimately what I think should happen, this is one of my ambitions, is you should start measuring the AI success also in terms of the premium that investors are willing to pay for companies that are AI enabled versus not, right? So when we buy, we want to underwrite AI value on the companies. So we are trying to figure this very early, but can I put a price to this? And is this something that we, can pay extra because of the strategic importance of this AI that we know we are able to execute, but also at exit, which is a bit more interesting to say, okay, is the multiple of two accounting companies where one is super AI enabled is kind of guaranteed to improve over time? Should you pay the same multiple for that company than another company that has never even started to use AI? I suspect that the AI-enabled company will probably be not only better in terms of profitability, obviously, but also in terms of potential of the price you put in. Over time, it should be higher. So that's a very, very early days in this conversation, but I think eventually we'll get there.
That's very interesting. And when it comes to this more strategic level, the more value chain related discussion on AI impact, you mentioned that it's a question to the board, right? It's a board discussion. Do you think that the average board member of companies understand AI enough to make these decisions?
It's a tricky question. I think the first question is whether this is a board-worthy discussion. And I truly think it is in many levels. But then the question of whether they understand, the reality is that it depends. So many times they don't actually. So we did this chairperson forum last year where we spoke about AI to all the chairs. And a few of them reached out precisely to soundboard a little bit on what what was expected of them, right? One chair said to me something along these lines. Pietro, we had this discussion. I was presented with a really kind of compelling set of initiatives or projects that we are doing. But I'm not sure that I'm the best judge of whether they're making the right choices or progressing well or not, right? Maybe this is not something new to AI. Maybe it was already kind of the case for digital transformation, right? Yes. So it's not a new thing. But I think that the nature of the discussions that I was referring to before about the value chain shifts. I truly think that the CEO will want to brainstorm about this stuff and get some exposure to insights into what might be the future, what should be the focus, what's the true essence of the company, and what do the owners want the company to be. And also the board needs to think, okay, is this the right CEO to deliver on all this potential that we are seeing here, or is the team the right team? So there's a lot of considerations. If you're in a very exposed market, for example, you need to have a wartime CEO, like a CEO that is ready to fight for the leading the pole position, right? So those are all topics that I think are very relevant.
So when companies now are building up these capabilities to deliver on AI and recruiting AI competency, and maybe also recruiting for head of AI and so on, where should they sit within the organization? Reporting to the CTO, CEO, or someone else?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll give you one example. We have a company that is a manufacturer, and I met the let's say the AI team, as they call it, the other day, and I was talking with this the leader of this team about their objectives, what they're trying to achieve. And I was amazed that the majority of the things he was talking about, he was not talking about AI. He was talking about increasing yield, improving the quality, reducing waste on the shop floor, reusing some of the waste to fulfill orders, and therefore creating, like commercial activity around the waste that is produced by these machines. And when discussing the blockers, effectively for this team to be able to deliver on some of those objectives, they would effectively have to change the way how the factory works. So they have to be able to tell the operator of this machine that they need to type in some numbers on the iPad before they tune the machine. And they need to look at the iPad so that the AI can tell them to reduce the buttons on the machine, right? The problem is that this team was actually under tech, so there was no mechanism built in for them to change the business process. It was like someone else's responsibility.
They didn't have the mandates.
The mandate, yeah, exactly. So that made me think that the KPIs, let's say the it's almost like the bonus of this team should be tied to the objectives they're trying to fulfill, and not to whatever bonus the structure is in place for the CTO of this company, right? So if you think, the CIO that has an objective to reduce the cost of IT, or to, whatever it might be the goal, it makes much more sense that the AI team has an efficiency KPI is like incentivized to really drive that type of value, right? So in this specific case, for me, it would make a lot of sense to consider having the team integrated into the business, right? Then there are considerations around career path and things like that. But I think in general, if you look at the majority of the use cases and how it proliferates inside the organizations, you see that you really want the AI engineers to share the incentive structure of that business function to the extent possible, right?
So do you see a future where you have AI engineers in every function in the business?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point is, while I think some companies will decide to create a chief AI officer that oversees all of this transformation, the danger is that the chief AI officer is not kind of sharing the same type of incentives as the COO, or have the ability to influence the roadmap of the CTO. So it might create a bit of a pickle in terms of accountability. But if you ask me, truly what I think would be, the next generation companies, the way how they will be formed, I think many companies will actually have these hybrid teams where you have the marketing department with 2 engineers whose job is to make the marketing like really, like next level, right? You could think about the same in like accounting. So you have the accounting team, but then there's like 2 folks whose job is to increase the data quality of those reports and really produce impeccable metrics. So that is a future I look forward to have organizations where the AI is more kind of embedded, and it applies the same for analytics and for it's really this automation thinking that is super common in the industrial companies, very uncommon in services side of the organizations.
So you really then build up the AI capabilities throughout the organization by embedding them in every function.
You try exactly. So you aim to really go for the long tail of efficiency. So like all these micro efficiencies that exist in every department, you need to create the ability to do that at that scale. I don't know if this model works. I haven't seen it, but I suspect that will be the future because it's so much easier to code now. It's so easy to build your own GPT. It's so easy to build like a vector search for your accounting documents. So I see that there's a commoditization of technology, or some people call it the democratization, that I don't really see why you wouldn't, for certain functions, really try to make this happen.
So instead of having a centralized function where you keep all the know-how when it's really difficult technically, you now prioritize alignment on incentives with the functions.
Yes.
As well as the domain knowledge.
Exactly.
Because when you're decentralized, you understand more the processes you're actually trying to improve. Yes,
exactly. So you have to create some mechanism to embed. This is a bit theoretical. It's for a bit of my personal view, but I think it would probably work. if you think about it, many tech companies, they already operate like this. So you have teams, and the teams reflect on how they can be more efficient all the time, like good teams, right?
Yeah. But we've seen that in data teams, for example, right? You've seen the decentralized approach, and many land in the hybrid, right? You have a central kind of data platform team that procures and builds up the capabilities, and then you have decentralized teams that implements them.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's not easy. I've seen it go really bad a few times, the distributed model.
Yeah. But it sounds nice in theory.
Mm-hmm.
And EQT being an investment company, I have to ask, what is a good investment from an AI angle?
All right, so it's a couple of things. One can think about that question in terms of which sectors to invest, but you can also think about, a specific asset, what makes for a good, AI story for a specific asset, right? So we're thinking about that in both aspects. So where should we go hunt? In order to do that, one of the studies that one of my colleagues did that was really interesting was looking at the effect of AI in the 6 main modes in software engineering, in the software industry. So traditionally, you would look at companies that have, for example, very high complexity. So software that is just hard to build, like an SAP or like embedded systems for chips. You would look at things like domain knowledge, companies that do a very specific tax software for a specific geography, or things like data, companies that have first-party data of very high quality, and a few more, right? So then what we did is we analyzed in a 10-year horizon whether this mode would be stronger or weaker with the things we are seeing with AI, and then based on that we looked at like all the sectors that were in scope for investment that traditionally were kind of very seen as a very strong moat around this sector, and we identified the ones where the moat was a little bit more relaxed now, or where the moat is actually stronger. Okay, and so that kind of framed areas of focus, and basically, it really informs the decision making process. But then what happens is that once you identify, let's say, a subsector that still has a pretty decent moat, you also need to think about how the companies compete there, right? But let me go back to the idea of the moats. So from the examples I gave, one example of a moat that is less of a moat in 10 years is the technical complexity. Why? Because with copilots and with all that is happening in the technology space, it is getting easier and easier to just copy a code to create a competitor product. It's so easy that you're seeing now. I don't know if you're following, but Chamath Palihapitiya just launched this company that is creating products that have 90% feature completion for 80% of the cost, or something like that, or 80% discount actually. So with the hypothesis that he has, if you need to build a CRM, you can literally just get some people to build a good enough CRM for you, and you monetize that. There's more examples like this. So the barrier to entry to software is much lower now, except in some very specific cases. Then you have data on the other side, which is data was a moat. It's more of a moat now because actually you can now take data and activate that data, monetize that data in a way that was not possible before. And also things like the industrial the business knowledge, so the functional knowledge of a specific area, becomes even more unique, right? Whoever has the expert in tax will probably make the best tax solution or legal solution, whatever it might be. And that is very interesting.
So which type of sectors has emerged as highly interesting for you based on these modes and the changes?
I mean, to the extent that I can disclose, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of surprises, I must say, a couple of changes of mind, but obviously, there's sectors where I still think they're attractive. It's just that the risk profile has changed. I think this is the most interesting aspect, actually. From this analysis, you see that there are sectors that are now very uninteresting for private equity, but extra interesting for ventures, right? So, if some vertical business software, if you're the incumbent, it's going to be very hard for you to create the new generation of that software. From a ventures perspective, is okay. There's 100% probability that a disruptor will pop up in this specific space, and that dynamics is what makes it extra important for companies that have a multi-strategy approach. They actually become they have an advantage because they see all of this, right? And I actually am personally involved in deals of both types, where the thesis is almost the opposite by design, which is beautiful.
So both the private equity and the venture side.
Yeah, you need to really think across the full type of strategy.
Yeah.
Another aspect as well, and if we go back to kind of the also some of the emerging places to invest. So if you think about AI companies, then the discussion is more about really understanding where the value accrues. Is it application level? Is it on the model level? Is it what types of new tooling will be needed to make all this new stack emerge? What about the compute? What about telecommunications and fibers and all of that? All the way down to the energy layer, like data centers. Where does the energy come from? Those are all very interesting discussions that I think everybody's figuring out.
Who do you think are the sellers of buckets and shovels in today's AI era?
So I think that there's a lot of concentration around the model layer. I'm of the opinion that if you just stop developing more models and you just take the ones that exist today, you have enough disruption potential to change the majority of the sectors, right? So I think the competition for better models is quite tricky. How to differentiate, right? And we can talk about for example, Llama 3 and what's going on there, but which means that then it's obviously about inference, right? So more than training, it's more about the inference layer. I think is where the majority of the workloads will be, and underneath that, like data centers and the energy and all of that. But on the inference layer, I still think there's room for a lot of convenience, right? So there's the inference layer, and then there's like all of these tools that you use to model. And there, I think that certain paradigms of kind of how you build these AI applications, what is the most convenient API to use a model, I think we are still very early days. We see OpenAI experimenting a lot with this. Now you can put the knowledge inside the API, and they're kind of adding these conveniences. But you can feel, actually, back to your first question, you can still feel this is not pure. We haven't really nailed the paradigm. It's almost like we're still coding in assembly. We still need the object-oriented programming hasn't been invented. I think it's the same here. So it's very nice to observe all the different things, but it's a very risky business to make some bets. I do see some areas that are starting to be a bit, clear to me that will be a lot of generating a lot of value. I think data is one. Obviously, having data to start specializing the models a little bit, I think, still very, nascent. It's not like you're seeing tons of specialized models out there. You do see some fine tunes, for example, in the image sector. So architecture firms that are creating models that design in a certain look. So all the video community is kind of doing a lot of work there.
So do you think the model builders are too far up the value chain to be the sellers of buckets and shovels?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the makers of models. So I saw yesterday.
They're the gold miners.
For example, Snowflake launched a model yesterday, I think. I'm not sure that the same value, if they had partnered with Meta or just, baked in Meta or fine-tuned Meta into something that has the same utility, maybe that would have been a better business decision for them. Even though they're saying there's some specific features in terms of performance. But my point is, it's not clear to me that everybody that is building models now should be building models, because then Meta comes in with an incredible model called Llama 3, and all that compute was already gone. Like no one's going to pick that other model. So this is where it's tricky. You need to have a very concrete differentiation on the model layer to actually for it to make sense. And if the differentiation is not there, people just go for convenience, right? So I think there might be some more value to be captured in that layer. I think there is a market for adapting models to your own use case. Specifically, if, for example, you want to optimize for cost or for a specific skill, it makes sense to use simpler things. I had someone yesterday told me something. If you ask ChatGPT how much is like 2 + 2, the amount of compute that is summoned to do like that, the easiest math in the world, is just insane, right? Makes no sense.
Because it's not computing, it's kind of predicting the next token.
That's right, exactly. So that is the worst possible way to do that. Like do a calculator. So in terms of let's say the value, I think that the whole model chain or the model layer still has room to grow. Just perhaps not in the way that I'm seeing, with very similar models being trained just for the fact that everybody wants. I think with open source, it kind of defeats the purpose. So where you're seeing the differentiation now is actually on the features at the inference level, right? So you see Cohere, you see something like Grok, which focuses on speed. Cohere focuses on enterprise features and like small little things that you can add. OpenAI is like experimenting with a variety of things, but they have multimodality and kind of all of those convenience. So I think now the differentiation happens there. And I think that there will be winners in that space. And then I think there's also a difference between the commercial and the open source. So if you take an open source model and you think about inference, I think there it will be just a cost race. So what is the cheapest place where I can run my Llama 3?
Yeah.
So there will be a lot of cost pressure.
Now we get a lot into Llama. So let's just properly introduce the different variants of Llama. So I think when Meta released Llama, their kind of semi-open source language models. It's not totally free for commercial use. That's why I say semi-open source, right? I think it shocked many people because it was, Meta wasn't the first company would think about when it comes to open sourcing and leading open source of LLMs. But now they have that position. And just a few weeks ago, they released the third variant of that. And what we have seen with the Llama models is that instead of building larger and larger models, they have focused on building much smaller models, single and double-digit billion parameters. But they have fed the models during training phase with a lot more data than what has historically been done, right? And Llama 3, they train it with 15 trillion data tokens. And I think Llama 2, they did 2 trillion. So they increase it by a factor of 7 and a bit more, right? And this is very big difference compared to what a lot of other model trainers did before, because a lot of other companies focus on building larger and larger models, but they didn't train them with as much data. It was very common that you did around 300 billion data tokens, but you had the models becoming several hundreds of billions in size, right? And Llama 3 performs very well, even the smaller sizes, right? They perform on par with GPT 3.5. And there is one even bigger that has not yet been released that is supposedly as good as GPT-4. So now to the kind of discussion of open source and closed source. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think the Llama release had a few more things that were interesting to me beyond the technical aspects. One of the things is that it seems like there was a big focus. So if you just think about how you use the model, there's a big focus on the let's say the quality, like how it feels to use it. I think they used very large amount. I don't remember if it's 10 million tokens or 10 billion tokens on of human curated data. So very good, high quality instruction tuning, really to make sure that it does what you ask it to do, right? So from an engineering perspective, now you actually seriously consider this. Okay, this actually does what I wanted to do. But also they released two different versions. So one version is the base model, and then another version is the instruct model. What this does is it creates a seed for thousands of models, derivative models of this family that are specialized. Okay, so if a company is thinking about creating like tuning on their own data set, Llama becomes a very good choice. On the commercial side, what's interesting is that if you decide to use that, you have to say powered by Llama, by Meta, which basically they just injected a network effect into their release that was really, really smart. So those were the things that I found interesting. And then the fact that it's a public model, what I think changes in terms of your strategic decision whether to use a commercial or this one is that when using a free, an open source model, you benefit from the competition on the inference layer, right? So if I decide to run Llama, I can very easily change between Llama on Google or Llama on AWS or whoever gives me the fastest inference. So I was actually trying it out in Grok, doing my benchmark informally with Grok, which is this inference company that runs models on CPUs, and it was I think 100 times faster than I think I was using Perplexity Labs, which is kind of a sandbox environment. So what that tells me as a decision maker, like which model should I choose, is okay, if I go this way, I'm probably going to get fast. My software will be faster over time. and I can control that. Whereas with a closed system, you have to trust they will decrease the price, which they do, by the way. They decrease the price, they release faster versions of the models, but it's very, very concentrated. So that for me was kind of the real news, is finally, I think there's a very, very, viable alternative. I haven't tried all the other model like Anthropic and very briefly, but not in production use cases. This was the first time that with the vibe check, I felt, this is a good one.
Do you feel that the performance gap has closed between the open source and the closed source ones?
I think it's better now in open source. So when you use something like Grok, it's much, much faster.
Okay, so when we talk performance, this is also an interesting topic because if you look at definitions of performance in different research papers, there are so many. There are hundreds of definitions of performance, and they seem to sometimes cherry pick the metric that shows them in a good light, right? Mm-hmm. But there are many ways to check performance. You have test results of different, SAT tests, etc., bar exam, etc. But one of the most common one that we still always revert back to is the vibe check. Does it feel human-like? Does it feel smart? Did it do what I expected it to do, right? Mm-hmm. So when you talk about performance and say that it's better, what do you mean by that?
Now I meant speed.
Yeah.
But in the release notes that Llama published, they actually published a new benchmark. So they did the normal benchmark, the academic benchmark. Yeah. But they released a new benchmark, which is a comparison made by humans. So they have 180, 1,800 commonly performed tasks. And then they had humans compare which one they like the most. Is it the Llama versus Claude versus some other? And which is really nice because they kind of formalized the vibe check in a way by including, of course, it's an expensive test, but it's actually probably the most honest test that you can make.
But then you do a vibe check at scale.
That's right. That's what they did.
So it is, many would argue, highly subjective and not necessarily reproducible.
Yeah, exactly. It's a qualitative test.
Yeah, but that's how we test them these days. It's important to notice.
I think so too. That was the test that I think that was the first thing I did. Was I tried to play around with it and see if it did the majority of the things I usually do.
Yeah.
One good thing to notice as well is that they also introduced significant improvements in terms of safety and ethics, both in terms of how they train the model, but also in terms of providing you with a separate model for let's say testing the input and output of your models and making sure that is on par with what you want. The benefit of having a separate model is that you can actually fine-tune your, censorship model. The auditor. Basically, you can fine-tune your own auditor to further harden production use cases in this case. So I'm excited about this. I haven't seen production use yet, but it seems like a meaningful step forward for sure.
And so if we define performance as kind of the vibe check, when humans decide which one is better, more qualitatively and subjectively, do you think that the performance gap has closed between the open source and the closed source models?
I think from my informal assessment, you start to see that there's such a thing as a personality of the model, which is interesting. So when I try to summarize a long
text, you spend too much time with the models.
Exactly, I do. But No, but it's very simple. So if you ask a summarization prompt, that like a specific summarization prompt I used, the answer in ChatGPT was quite formal.
Yeah.
And the other model was a bit more playful, so maybe a little bit more light.
Yeah.
Hearted. And for example, I use when I'm writing, I use the Notion AI. I really like the type of text that it produces. So I also see there's over time a preference. But the interesting thing here is that people talk about choice, and people say you can go with OpenAI, but if you want, you can use another model. And what I've seen is that the type of prompt engineering you use is very model specific, right?
Yes.
Which means that with OpenAI's models, you can use OpenAI or Microsoft if you want the same prompt and get similar results. But in terms of inference, with an open source model, you'll have a lot more ability to shift your payload somewhere else, but retain all the prompting work you do. So in principle, it should work fairly similar. And I suspect I'm not sure about this, but I suspect that also derivatives of these models. So if you have a fine tune of Llama for healthcare, probably you can still prompt it in a fairly similar way and it will work. You don't need to kind of re-prompt engineering the whole thing, which basically gives you optionality. So I'm bullish about this. This is a new thesis that I'm kind of still thinking about, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, and one thing that is very exciting when they create these much smaller models and train it on a lot more data is they optimize for inference speed and cost, right? Because a smaller model, much cheaper to serve in production, right?
Yeah,
I think Llama 3 is at least publicly known the model that is trained on the most data tokens, right? Yep. And that's probably one of the reasons why we see that big jump in performance given the little size of those models.
I think so too. Yeah, but I think there will be other areas of differentiation, right? So you asked about the vibe check. I think the differentiation on inference will be like a spectrum of things, right? So it will be, the specific controls you have on the API level, right? So one thing I think OpenAI does really well is they give you, for example, the ability to call functions, to connect it to memory. They're basically building this ecosystem of functionality you can use. What I'm hoping for is that some companies will take these open models and even innovate more, and maybe with like community efforts and create like better, like nicer versions of function calling or better abstractions for interacting with memory and with knowledge that are not just the RAG approach or the prompt size approach. And also I'm seeing some people work on things like understanding what's inside the network. So which attention heads are activated when you make a certain question. And I think that there will be eventually also additional data, like data feed that you get from those insights that we have about how the model actually works.
Yeah,
that will be very interesting to see, and how we can use that for tools. Yeah.
But I think you have a very good point in terms of the APIs that OpenAI serves. It's much more convenient compared to the open source ones.
For sure.
And that is a big factor for adoption these days, because people just want to get started and they don't want to have a whole team to kind of make it usable.
Yeah.
And let's move on to another topic, the topic of data, right? Because everyone kind of says that data is the new oil, the new gold, the new land, the new everything. What's your thinking around that? You interact with a lot of companies in the portfolio. Something I hear a lot is, we have unique data. That's a moat. That's a unique thing for us. Is all data relevant and valuable? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think data is it's the most important thing in your digital strategy, right? The systems exist for the sole purpose of generating data. What people do all day is they generate data when they interact with systems. So data is truly the unit of value in software, right? What happens is that people are not super thoughtful about how they produce this data. Okay, so when you have a business process that allows you to insert a bunch of like garbage data into your system, you think that you can clean that up later, right? There's this idea that someone told me something very funny, which is they think you can take the salmonella out of the chicken.
Yeah.
So that is typically a harder thing to do. So I think in principle, there is there should be a bit more effort at the front. But then you spend time, you generate a lot of data, you buy a new company, you change from one system to another, and you end up with this this vast amount of raw material, but you never really activate that data in any way, right? So the metaphor I like to use as a lot is this idea that data is like your salad or your potatoes on a restaurant. But then you need to start thinking about how to make that into a healthy meal. And there are steps you need to make. So one of the things we used to talk about in Motherbrain Labs is this called the mise en place or the prep work, which is like, spending time putting your data in a shape that makes it easy when you need to prep a meal for a client. It's easy, right? So we invested quite a bit in kind of organizing the foundation, even unboxing data sets. We had these data sets that were expensive, but we never used them. So really understanding what's out there. It's like, oh, I have these ingredients. Nice, we can cook this meal. So putting some energy there it's important. And then obviously, unfortunately, most data teams, they spend 90% of their energy on these two steps, but very, very few actually spend the majority of the time actually on the value, on the insights, right? And this applies to all the companies, basically. So then, of course, in terms of maturity, you have companies that are already in a good state. And you have companies that haven't started yet. The ones that are in the good state, what I think the new opportunity is to actually take those existing data sets and do two things. One is improving the usefulness of that data. And what I mean is, if you have a bunch of emails from your clients or tickets from your clients blocked inside these rows, you can now with AI extract snippets of metadata from those, like literally read every single email and generate a new table or new column with information that is useful for you, that you can actually convert into insights and say, basic example, sentiment analysis, really read through everything and do a sentiment analysis in the last 20 years, right? That's very unique. The other thing is you can harvest new data. So you can literally just go and scrape all of your competitors' websites or see what people are complaining about on your competitors' products and launch a campaign that addresses that targets those people that say that the certain thing was not good. So companies can start thinking about leveraging AI to generate assets that make sense for their the type of healthy meal they want to serve their clients. And then lastly, there's this other category of companies that have been sitting on a data asset. And it's very typical, actually, when you invest on a company, you look at, okay, what are the data assets? And then you say, oh, here's a beautiful data asset. We can monetize that. Cool. Then we buy the company. But then good luck monetizing, right? It's locked. It's like it's this database no one wants to touch.
Why does no one want to touch that data?
Because it's hard, right? It's sometimes it's a very large database, very unstructured. No one really understands the schema.
It's messy.
It's messy. Yeah, it needs some love.
A lot.
Yeah, and so what I think, sometimes, I maybe I can give you an example. Imagine you're a company that has migrated CRM 3 times, and there's very rich data about your clients, but in the last migration you decided to do a cutoff and not bring that old data in, so you have historical purchases of your clients sitting on 3 different databases, and you really don't want to touch that, right? So when you come into this company, you say, well, we have this amazing information about buy behavior in this category, but there's really not much you can do about it because it's just blocked in, right? So
is that something you can see before you buy the company?
Very hard. I mean, you never get to that detail. It's rare that you get to that level of detail.
Yeah.
You might ask, do you have historical data? And then you might have a discussion on, we could use that historical data to do such and such use case. But you don't know exactly how how easy it is to activate or unfreeze that data from the archive, right? What I think is interesting now is that with AI, so you can literally run a language model that reads every single transaction that you had and generates a new clean data set, a derivative data set. That is the one thing you use to feed your reports, okay? Obviously, there's nuances. There's engineering involved in terms of matching.
So you're basically saying that you can use large language models to clean up the mess.
That's exactly it. So you can literally create like the most horrible combination of my client information. You don't even need to match anything. You just need to cram it all into the prompt, and then ask the LLM, okay, read through this stuff and extract one of these 3 categories. What do they like to buy? And then it will read through these JSON blobs and answer like very clean answer, pristine. It's like it's like a filter, really.
So there you have a business idea right there to purchase companies with these, the ones that have invested a lot in data but never realize any value out of it, and then you structure it up.
Yeah, 100%. So that's a very concrete case of where you try to find value with AI. That is not as obvious as the customer support bots or.
Cool, very cool. And to the final question then, what are you the most excited about for the future? Big question.
It's a very big, and there are many different things. I think looking at how technology is evolving it's insanely fun, right? And the thing I'm least excited about is actually this type of early use cases, like the support agents and this or that. And I'm more excited about the next generation, the stuff that is a bit harder to build. So just taking this example, funny new ways of using data, I think it's very interesting to see how the software will show that. So I think that the thing that I'm more excited about, that I've been spending more time reflecting on, is it's the evolution of the way how users interact with software. So obviously now you're seeing a lot of co-pilots and a lot of very exposed AI, like the AI button, the Ask AI. And I'm intrigued to see basically how the software developers are actually coming through that and creating more natural to use software, right? So things that just flow better, and everybody hates their workflow setup. I still haven't figured out which note-taking system I want. So I want the new category of note-taking systems to emerge that really is adapted to me, is like a much better fit. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is also on the back end, as we start interacting with these artificial colleagues, like AI workers, like the AI accountant, the AI marketing person, what are the systems that those AIs need to use? So how will they interact with the ledger or with the database, so that we can truly achieve the level of autonomy that everybody's is dreaming about. So those are two areas. I call them both AI experience. It's more like the AI experience for the user, but also the UX for the AI, which is probably some API or some mental model that I will create prompts on. So yeah, those two things I'm very intrigued about. And then it's just like seeing the emerging companies and seeing what they do. I love that. I'm completely obsessed with exploring evolution.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Pietro, for joining the podcast, and thank you so much for sharing your insights and learnings so generously with us.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the podcast. It's really cool.
Thank you so much.